What's going on, everybody? Boris here at your College of Design Studio, and today I want to talk about societal collapse and the way it applies to our cities. Our nation is facing severe issues that could, if unaddressed or addressed inappropriately, lead to a decline in living standards for all of us. The effects of soil erosion, deforestation, decreasing water quality and quantity, expanding population, coal dependence, mercury pollution, social inequality in the U.S. All these problems have been left unaddressed for far too long, and at present, these problems, severe as though they are, might not lead to societal collapse. That doesn't mean that they should be ignored until such a time that they can't be left unaddressed any longer. Action must be taken now to improve the situation on a national basis. Take soil erosion, for example, which is problematic for several reasons. First, only about 1% of food eaten in our nation's cities is locally grown. Should the infrastructure on which they depend collapse or decrease in functionality, local stores and warehouses only carry about a 3-day supply of food for residents. Soil erosion in farmland communities and areas decrease our city's capacity or ability to return to local self-sufficiency in an emergency scenario. Other limiting factors are freshwater quality and quantity, both of which are in decline in the United States. Take atrazine pollution, for example, which contributes to the declining water quality in our nation. Atrazine is a white crystalline solid, and it's used as a synthetic herbicide to kill broadleaf weeds in agricultural and roadway applications, such as sugarcane crops, on roadway grasses, golf courses, golf turf, and residential lawns. In humans, atrazine disturbs fetal development and prolongs the time it takes to reach puberty by affecting hormonal production. More severe effects such as heart disease and liver damage have been identified as a possible result of atrazine exposure in drinking water. In amphibians, feminization rates are increased in frogs and hormonal development is disrupted. Atrazine exposure is responsible for damaging amphibian immune system, which leads to higher incidence of disease and infection, both viral and bacterial. The duality of this effect is severe enough to potentially lead to severe decline in amphibian population. Water supplies, human health, and biodiversity in the U.S. are threatened. And it's not just atrazine doing this. There are many more agricultural chemical products that we use to treat soil with that are affecting biodiversity and water quality throughout our nation. At present, our cities have taken little or no action to address either atrazine level or major pollution in our drinking and non-drinking water system and defer to federal standards for potable water. This places local ecosystems at risk during an emergency scenario where the availability of drinking water is critical and imposes economic costs on the community. The lakes and groundwater tables we depend on are increasingly decreasing in quality and quantity as residents use large quantities for non-productive uses, like watering their lawns. In societal collapse, what Jared Diamond writes about Montana is true for all states in the United States. There isn't enough water when each of those 40 house owners tries to water and keep the house's garden green without realizing that the other 39 neighbors are irrigating simultaneously. In the face of climate change, this is an increasingly unwise scenario. Though the exact consequences of global warming are uncertain, the disruption of weather patterns and ecosystem functions by increasing world temperatures could have major effects on habitat ranges and agricultural production. While we know that global warming carries negative effects for ecosystems, their exact severity is difficult to predict. Because of this, excessive use of water by communities for non-productive use is dangerous, especially when we take into consideration soil erosion and chemical pollution, such as atrazine discussed previously. Our towns are not sufficiently prepared for a severe downturn or breakdown of infrastructure on which they're increasingly dependent. From Native American societies, we see that a series of good years with adequate rainfall or with sufficiently shallow groundwater tables may result in population growth, resulting in turn in society becoming increasingly complex and interdependent and no longer self-sufficient. Or I should say locally self-sufficient. The same is true of the United States, although the cause for this increase in complexity in population is not rainfall. America is a highly interdependent society. As the level of technological capacity in the United States increases, so does the complexity and interdependence of our cities. With an increase in social complexity in Native American society, we observe how they could no longer revert to the original condition of self-supporting mobile little groups. Because the trees in the canyons were gone, the areas were cut below field levels, and the growing population had filled up the region and left no unoccupied, suitable areas to which to move. The same is true of the U.S. for different reasons. To support their population, our cities rely on food imports from different regions in the United States. The level of technology residents are accustomed to cannot all be produced or maintained locally. The electric power required to run those technologies cannot be obtained locally either and requires electricity generated in different regions. The fuel used in our vehicles is neither mined nor refined locally. Thus, our cities and towns are dependent on the other U.S. regions and even other nations to sustain their transportation infrastructure. These external goods and services on which we are reliant also enable us to maintain a much larger population than we could in their absence. In Native American cultures such as the Pueblo, this dense population could no longer support itself but was subsidized by outlying satellite settlements constructed in a similar architectural style and joined to the Chaco Canyon by radiating regional networks of hundreds of miles of roads that are still visible today. This is very reminiscent of the United States and the current interstate network that we have that supports cities with food, with produce, with technology, with fuel and electricity, and all the things that we need to sustain a modern lifestyle. The vast interstate highway system in the US and the many towns and communities surrounding agricultural or technological centers are simply the modern equivalent of historic examples Native American societies provide. As a result of this intensification in interconnectedness and technological developments, we're not only dependent on the imports of food and certain goods, but on the very complexity of the mechanism as a whole.